My wife didn't raise her voice. She didn't even look guilty. She stood at the kitchen island in her Christmas sweater, red knit, little stitched-on reindeer like it was funny, and said it the way you'd announce the weather. My ex-lover will be joining us for Christmas dinner, Lila said. Act like an adult. The kettle behind her started to scream. I let it scream. The worst part wasn't the sentence itself. It was how easy it was for her, like she'd practiced it in the mirror on the way home, checking the angle of her chin. Like she'd already watched my reaction in her head and decided it would be satisfying. For months, Lila had been living just slightly to the left of me. Same bed, different planet. She'd started treating every question like an accusation. If I asked how her day was, she'd answer like I was auditing her. Fine, she'd say, eyes on her phone. Busy. Busy became her favorite word. Busy meant don't ask. Busy meant you're not worth the details. I'd noticed the little shifts the way you notice a house settling. A creak here, a new draft there. Nothing dramatic until you realize the foundation is moving. Her laugh went elsewhere. Her touch became rare and staged, like she was clocking in. She stopped using my name. When she did say it, it sounded like she was reading it off a label. And still, a part of me kept waiting for an explanation that would make it all reasonable. Stress, depression, work, anything but what it was. Tonight she handed me the truth wrapped in a holiday bow and expected me to thank her for being honest. I looked at the Christmas lights blinking in the window and thought about how fast you can hate something you used to love when you realize it was never for you. Of course, I said. I smiled, because my face still remembered the old rules, even when my chest didn't. The kind of smile you put on when a stranger bumps your cart at the grocery store and you pretend you didn't feel the shove. The kitchen smelled like pine from the cheap candle she liked and the onions I'd chopped for tomorrow's stuffing. Outside, Briar Hollow was taking on that clean holiday lie, fresh snow, warm porch lights, the whole town pretending to be decent for 48 hours. Lila rested her hands on the counter like she owned the wood, the air, the time I'd spent building any of it. She had a way of holding still that made you feel like you were the one moving wrong. It'll be at my mom's, she added. 7, don't be late, and don't embarrass me. There it was, the extra little twist, the blade after the punch. I turned the stove off. The kettle kept screaming for a moment, then faded like it realized nobody cared. Your mom invited him? I asked. She agreed, Lila said. Mom thinks it's healthier. Closure. Like adults. I nodded like that made sense. Like marriage was a group project you could bring outsiders into as long as you called it emotional maturity. What's his name again? I asked, because I already knew. I just wanted to hear her say it in my house. Lila's eyes flicked up. Gavin. Like she was proud of the syllables. In my mind, I saw Gavin's hand on the small of her back from a memory I'd never actually witnessed, but my imagination didn't need permission anymore. It had been watching the gaps for months. Late team events, new perfume, her phone face down, the way she'd flinch if I came into a room too quietly. This was her Christmas gift to herself. Humiliation wrapped in tinsel. I leaned on the sink and looked at her. A year ago, I would have asked why. I would have tried to negotiate my own dignity like it was a bill I could pay down in installments. Tonight, I just said, okay. She blinked. Okay? Okay, I repeated. She studied me, looking for the tremor, the crack, the outburst she could point to later and say, see? This is why. I kept my hands relaxed. I kept my breathing calm. I kept my voice flat. Lila didn't like calm. Calm made her feel out of control. You're not going to make a scene, she said, like it was a command. No, I said. I'm going to act like an adult. Her mouth tightened. She wanted a fight. She wanted me to break so she could call it proof. Instead, I picked up the cutting board and rinsed it, slow and steady. Water ran over the wood, over my knuckles, over the small scar on my thumb from the first apartment we'd shared when we were poor, and she still laughed at my jokes. Good, she said, because I'm not doing this holiday drama thing. We're past it. Past it, past me, past whatever vows meant when nobody was listening. She turned and walked out, her socks whispering on the tile. She didn't look back because she assumed I would. She assumed I'd be standing there with my pride in my hands like a broken ornament. I didn't move until I heard the bedroom door close. Then I reached into the drawer where we kept old paper things, takeout menus, warranty cards. The lease folder I insisted on keeping even though she called paperwork a vibe brutaler. My fingers found the folder's edge, stiff and familiar. I pulled it out and set it on the counter. And for the first time that night, I let my smile show teeth. I thought about the first time we'd toured the house. 2 bedrooms, 1 cramped office, a little fenced yard. The landlord had asked for both our names, and Lila had waved a manicured hand like it was a fly. "Just put Ethan," she'd said, laughing. "Paperwork is such a vibe brutaler." I'd laugh too, because I wanted to be the kind of man who didn't care about boring details. Turns out boring details are the only things that hold up when the emotional stuff collapses. I wasn't planning to embarrass her. I was planning to introduce her to consequences. People think revenge starts with a shout. They think it starts with a punch through drywall or a screaming match in the driveway where the neighbors pretend not to listen. Mine started with silence and a spreadsheet. Before I did anything else, I drove to the bank where our joint checking account lived, one of those brick buildings with poinsettias by the door and a bowl of cheap candy that tasted like old peppermint. A young guy in a tie asked how he could help, his smile bright and empty. "I want to lower the limit on our joint credit line," I said, "and I want an alert on any large transfers." His smile tightened. "Is there a problem, sir?" "There might be," I said. "I'm being proactive." He typed, clicking through menus like he was playing a video game. "You can't remove a joint owner without consent," he said. "I'm not asking to remove her," I said. "I'm asking to protect myself." He nodded, and his fingers sped up. The screen reflected in his glasses, numbers flickering like a heartbeat. "Done," he said finally. "You'll both get a notice." "Good," I said. "Notices are fine. Surprises are what I'm avoiding." When I walked back to my truck, the air felt sharper. Not because the cold changed, because the world had. I'd taken a step that couldn't be undone. Not a dramatic step, a quiet one. The kind of step that, months from now, would look like the exact moment I chose myself. On the drive home, I rehearsed my voice the way an actor rehearses a scene. Calm. Even. No sarcasm out loud. Sarcasm stays inside where it can't be used against you. At work, the holiday rush had people buying last-minute extension cords and replacement bulbs like they could patch their lives with a quick trip to aisle 7. I walked the floor, answered questions, smiled when I had to. My hands did what they always did. Measure, cut, lift, fix, stability work. In the break room, I stared at the vending machine and realized I hadn't eaten. My appetite had become a rumor. I bought a coffee and watched the steam curl up. It made me think of the kettle last night, screaming into an empty room. Everything that wanted attention had been ignored. After my shift, I stopped at an office supply store and bought a new pack of printer ink and heavier paper. The cashier asked if I was printing holiday cards. "Something like that," I said. The truth was, I wanted my evidence to feel official. I wanted it to look like something you couldn't dismiss with a laugh. I wanted it to survive the moment Lila tried to snatch it off the table and tear it up. You can tear flimsy paper. Heavy paper fights back. Lila's favorite move was to turn my emotion into evidence. If I got angry, she called me unstable. If I got sad, she called me manipulative. If I asked for honesty, she called me controlling. So I stopped giving her anything she could twist. I sat at the same kitchen table where we'd once planned vacations and argued about paint colors, and I opened our wireless account on my laptop. The login was mine. The account holder was mine. Lila had always said it was your boring stuff, like the boring stuff didn't keep lights on. Call logs aren't romantic. They're numbers and timestamps and minutes. They don't tell you what someone said, only how long they stayed on the line. It was enough. There it was, the same number, again and again. Weeknights. Late. The kind of calls that start after you've told your husband you're too tired to talk. I clicked through months of it, and my stomach turned in a slow, patient way, like it had been waiting for permission to drop. I didn't screenshot. I didn't forward anything yet. I printed the account summary. Paper has weight. Paper doesn't disappear when someone deletes a thread. Then I checked the shared email inbox, the one we used for utilities and travel confirmations. Lila forgot about it because it wasn't shiny. It didn't give her likes. A reservation confirmation sat there from 3 weeks ago. Lakeside Lodge, 2 nights. King bed, under Lila's name, and in the notes section, second guest arriving Friday. Early check-in requested. Second guest. I stared at that line until it felt like it was staring back. I didn't need a private investigator. I didn't need a hacker. I needed Lila's habit of treating shared life like storage she never organized. I slid the printed pages into the lease folder. Then I went into the closet and opened the lockbox where we kept passports and our marriage certificate. The key was on top of the fridge because I was the only one who ever cared where things were. Inside was our prenup, folded and untouched. Lila's father had insisted on it when she was starting her marketing job, and he wanted to protect her future. I had signed because I was young and in love and stupid enough to think love was a shield. The prenup protected her premarital savings. It also protected mine. I traced the signature line with my thumb, my name, inked clean. In the morning, I drove to a strip mall law office with a neon family law sign and a parking lot full of tired cars. The attorney was a woman in her 40s named Carter. No fancy desk, no fake sympathy. Just clear eyes and a legal pad. "You're asking me if you can kick her out," Ms. Carter said after I gave her the short version, leaving out the part where my wife was inviting her ex to Christmas dinner like it was a potluck dish. "I'm asking what's smart," I said. She nodded. "Smart is quiet. Smart is documented. Smart is you not doing anything that makes you look unstable." I almost laughed. Lila had been trying to paint me unstable for months. A slow drip of little comments. "You're sensitive. You overthink. You're paranoid." Ms. Carter slid a checklist toward me. Ms. Carter asked me questions that felt like inspections. "Any kids?" she said. "No," I answered. "Any shared property titled together?" she asked. "Just the furniture," I said. "The house lease is in my name." She nodded like she'd been waiting for that. "Good. That simplifies occupancy." She didn't say easy. Lawyers don't say easy. She explained timelines, filing, service, temporary orders, the way courts care about money and paperwork more than feelings. She told me what not to do. Don't lock someone out violently, don't dump their stuff on the lawn, don't send angry texts that can be read aloud by strangers in a courtroom. "Think of a judge as a tired parent," she said. "They don't want drama, they want order." I let that sink in. Then she looked up and said, "And one more thing. Don't let her bait you into a confrontation she can record." I swallowed. "She's been trying." Ms. Carter's mouth tightened. "Of course she has." She handed me a folder with copies of everything we'd discussed, plus a simple line on top in bold, "Keep communication written when possible." I walked out feeling like I'd just been handed a map out of a burning building. "Separate accounts," she said. "Credit cards. Freeze the joint line or lower limits. Don't drain anything, just protect yourself. Communicate in writing when you can. And if you have evidence of an affair, keep it clean. No illegal recordings." "I have call logs," I said, "and a reservation email." "Perfect," she said. "Boring evidence is the best evidence. Judges love boring." I walked out of her office with divorce papers drafted but not filed, tucked into a plain envelope like a bomb that didn't tick until I wanted it to. On the way home, my phone buzzed. A notification from a local charity group Lila followed popped up. "Gala committee welcomes new sponsor, Gavin Mercer." Mercer. That was his last name. I tapped the post. A photo of Gavin in a suit, smiling next to an older couple, champagne flutes raised. The caption praised his integrity and community leadership. In the comments, someone wrote, "Congrats again on your engagement." I stared at that word, engagement, like it was a trap door. So that was it. His weakness wasn't strength or muscle. It was image. A man built out of applause and borrowed respect. And he was walking into my wife's mother's dining room tomorrow night, thinking he was the guest of honor. I closed the app and kept driving, the winter sun low and pale over Briar Hollow. At the next red light, I opened my notes and wrote one line. Gavin Mercer, reputation first. Then another, make him watch it burn. Christmas Eve morning, I went where men like Gavin go when they want to be seen doing something healthy. The Briar Hollow Athletic Club sat behind a glass facade like a bank for sweat. I didn't have a membership, but I didn't need one. The parking garage was public, the entrance was open, people came and went. Nobody asked questions as long as you walked like you belonged. A security cart rolled by on the far side of the level, its headlights sweeping the concrete. I kept my shoulders loose and my pace normal. You don't run unless you want to be noticed. Gavin glanced at the cart too. For a moment his eyes met mine with something like calculation. Can I make this guy look like a threat in front of a witness? He could try. Men like Gavin don't fight fair. They fight clean. They fight with optics. So when he stepped sideways as if to accidentally bump me, I pivoted, letting him miss. His hand brushed my coat and he smiled, innocent. "Careful," he said loudly, in case anyone was listening. "Always," I replied, just as loud. The cart's headlights swept past again, then faded. The garage returned to its damp quiet. Gavin's smile stayed, but his eyes told the truth. He'd expected me to bite. I parked 2 levels down from the entrance and waited with my seat leaned back. The concrete smelled damp. Somewhere above, music thumped faintly. Holiday remixes that tried to sound provocative. At 10:12 a.m., a black SUV rolled down the ramp and found a spot near the elevator. Clean. New. The kind of car you buy when you want people to think you've never made a mistake. Gavin stepped out wearing a fitted coat and expensive sneakers. He moved like he owned the space, like the lines painted on the ground were suggestions made for other men. He didn't see me at first. I got out and walked toward him, steady. My heart didn't race. Not because I was brave, because I'd already lived through the worst part, realizing the person you sleep next to can look you in the eye and lie with a straight face. Gavin looked up when I was 10 feet away. His smile flickered, then reformed, polished and smug. "Ethan," he said, like we were old friends. "Wow, small town." I stopped 2 feet from him, close enough to smell his cologne, close enough to see the tiny dry line at the corner of his mouth where he'd shaved too fast. "Gavin," I said, "Merry Christmas." His eyes slid past me, checking for witnesses. The garage was mostly empty, but a security camera blinked above the elevator doors. He relaxed a little when he realized cameras don't capture sound. "You here to talk?" he asked. "I'm here to see you," I said. He laughed softly. "Lila told me you were chill." "She did," I said. "She also told you to come to Christmas dinner." His eyebrows lifted. "She told you?" "She announced it," I said. "In my kitchen, like she was adding a chair." Gavin's grin widened. "She's honest. That's one thing I like about her." The words hit like spit. I took a step closer. Gavin didn't move back, but I saw his throat work, a swallow he didn't mean to show. "You're engaged," I said. His smile paused. "Excuse me?" "Congratulations," I said. "Who's the lucky woman?" His eyes narrowed, and for the first time his confidence looked like something he'd practiced in a mirror. "That's not your business," he said. "Neither is my wife," I said. The air got colder. Not because of the garage, because he realized I wasn't here to beg. I wasn't here to bargain. I was here to confirm what I already knew. Gavin shifted his weight. "Look, man, adults do what they do. Lila isn't your property." I almost laughed at that, how men like him use the language of freedom when it benefits them. "No," I said. "She's not my property, but my life is my life, and you walked into it." He leaned closer, his voice low. "You want advice? Smile tomorrow. Don't make a scene. People respect restraint. People respect fear," I said. His nostrils flared. "What's that supposed to mean?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out his key fob. His face changed instantly. He patted his coat, frantic for half a second, then forced calm. "Give that back." "You dropped it," I lied. He took a step forward. I didn't move. I held the fob between 2 fingers like it was nothing. "My wife thinks tomorrow is about humiliating me," I said, "but it's not." Gavin's eyes flicked again to the camera. He lowered his voice. "You're going to threaten me on tape?" "I'm going to tell you a fact," I said. "Facts aren't threats." He clenched his jaw. I walked past him to his SUV. He followed, fast, hands half raised like he didn't want to touch me and risk leaving a mark. I crouched by the front tire and pressed the valve stem with the edge of the key fob until air hissed out in a long, steady breath. Gavin cursed under his breath. "What the hell are you doing?" "Letting you know I can," I said. "Dude." He started. I stood and did the second tire. Same soft hiss, same patient release. I wasn't damaging anything. I wasn't slashing. I wasn't breaking. I was just making him late, making him inconvenienced, making him feel, for the first time, that control could be taken. I handed the key fob back and stepped away. My fingers were steady, but inside my ribs something was shaking. Not fear, adrenaline. The body doesn't care what your mind has decided. It still floods you with chemicals when you stand inches from a stranger and dare him to cross a line. I wanted to cross lines too. I wanted to do something permanent. But permanent is how you end up with handcuffs and a story that makes you the villain in court, not just in her head. So I stayed in the narrow lane, legal, clean, humiliating. 2 soft, hissing tires, 2 quiet reminders that I could touch his life without leaving bruises. That was the point? Gavin stared at his car, then at me. His face wasn't smug anymore. It was tight, pale under the garage light. "You're crazy," he said. "No," I said. "I'm awake." He swallowed again. "Lila said you'd smile and swallow it," he muttered. I leaned in close enough that he could hear the calm in my voice. "Tell Lila," I said, "that I'll smile tomorrow too." His eyes widened. He wanted to ask what that meant. He didn't. Pride held his tongue like a gag. I turned and walked back to my car without looking over my shoulder. On the way out of the garage, I passed the security camera again and felt a strange comfort in its blind indifference. Let it record me walking. Let it record my calm. Let it record that I didn't touch him, didn't swing, didn't shout. Lila's future story, Ethan went crazy, needed me to act crazy. I wasn't going to help her. Behind me, Gavin's phone rang. He answered with a forced laugh. "Hey, babe," he said. Babe. I slid into my seat and watched in the mirror as he paced beside the SUV with 2 flat tires, telling someone he was fine. And I thought, tomorrow night, the whole room will finally see what fine looks like when it starts to crack. By Christmas afternoon, Lila was in performance mode. She floated through the living room in a silky green dress, humming along to carols, talking to her mother on speakerphone like nothing was wrong. "Yes, Mom, I told Ethan," she said sweetly. "He's being mature." I sat on the couch with the lease folder in my lap, pretending to watch the snow fall. The folder felt heavy, like a weapon you didn't have to swing to make people nervous. On the counter, Lila's phone buzzed now and then. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The point wasn't to steal secrets. The point was to let her drown in the ones she'd already made. She walked into the kitchen and saw the index cards. "You're really doing this?" she asked, amused. "Sure," I said. Lila poured herself a glass of wine like she was rewarding herself for tolerating me. "Just remember," she said, swirling it. "People are watching tomorrow." I nodded. "I know." "Like," she continued, eyes on the dark liquid, "Gavin's friends, Mom's friends. If you act weird, it'll get around." "Got it," I said. She waited for a reaction. I gave her none. That absence made her angry in a way she couldn't admit. Later, while she was upstairs doing her hair for no one but her reflection, my phone rang. Lila's name lit the screen. I let it ring twice before I hit decline. Then I let it ring again. Twice. Decline. On the third call, she went to voicemail, and her voice came through my speaker with that same bright carelessness she used when she assumed I'd always be there. That's the thing about people who think they're untouchable. They leave their fingerprints everywhere. Lila ended the call and turned to me. "See? Easy. We can do this like adults." I looked at her. "Like adults?" I echoed. She smiled, satisfied. Then her eyes sharpened. "You're not going to do something stupid." "What counts as stupid?" I asked. "Any scene," she said. "Any dramatic thing. If you embarrass me in front of my family, Ethan, I'll ruin you." It wasn't a threat she made in anger. It was an offer she made in confidence. She believed she had the social power, the narrative power, the ability to tell a story and make people believe it. I nodded once. "Noted." She watched me, waiting for my voice to shake. It didn't. "Also," she added, like she was checking items off a list, "Gavin's had a rough week. Be nice." I almost choked. A rough week. "Don't be sarcastic," she snapped. "He has pressure. People rely on him." "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'm sure." Lila went into the kitchen, and I followed, because I wanted her to see me do it. I opened the drawer and pulled out a stack of blank index cards and a marker. "What's that?" she asked. "A tradition," I said. She frowned. "We don't have traditions." "We do now," I said. "I thought your mom might like it. Everyone writes down something they're grateful for, and we read them out after dinner, like a toast, but more personal." Lila blinked. Suspicion and vanity fought in her eyes. "Why?" she said. "Because you said act like an adult," I said. "Adults do gratitude." She let out a laugh, and it sounded relieved. "Fine, cute, whatever." I kept my face neutral. "I'll bring the cards." She leaned against the counter. "And you won't make it weird." "I won't," I said. The truth was, the cards were for cover. The real tradition was the envelope in my jacket pocket. Inside it were copies of the call logs, the reservation email, and a printed screenshot of Gavin's engagement congratulations comment. I'd highlighted the relevant lines in yellow like a high school kid marking a textbook. Boring, clear, undeniable. I'd also printed something else, the draft divorce petition Ms. Carter had prepared, with the date line left blank. On the back of the petition, Ms. Carter had handwritten a note. "Keep your tone calm. People remember tone more than facts." Lila didn't know I'd seen her. She didn't know I'd documented. She didn't know I'd already scheduled a filing appointment for Monday morning. She thought Christmas dinner was her stage. I spent the next hour packing a small bag and leaving it in my trunk. Not because I planned to run, but because I planned to be ready. You don't set a fire without knowing where you're standing when it catches. In the car, Lila turned the heater up too high, then complained it was dry. She adjusted the radio 3 times, never settling on a song long enough to let it be background. "Just so we're clear," she said, staring out at the snow-dusted streetlights, "this is not me asking permission." "I didn't think it was," I said. She looked at me finally, eyes glittering. "Good. Because I'm tired of living in a house where I have to tiptoe around your moods. My moods, I repeated. You get quiet and weird, she said. You sulk. You make everything heavy. I gripped the steering wheel. You invited another man to Christmas dinner. And you're making it about you, she snapped. Of course. That was her magic trick. Take a fire and call it my smoke. She leaned back, satisfied with her own logic. If you act normal, she said, maybe we can salvage things. Salvage, I said, tasting the word. Like a wrecked car you strip for parts. Lila smiled. See? That's the attitude. Don't be dramatic. I stared at the road, white lines sliding under the headlights. I won't be dramatic, I said. Lila's smile widened, believing she'd won. She didn't understand that calm isn't surrender. Sometimes calm is the final form of anger. At 6:30, we drove to her mother's house on Maple Ridge Road. The neighborhood was expensive in a quiet way. Wide lawns, tasteful lights, wreaths that looked like they'd been curated by someone with a degree. Her mom, Diane, opened the door before we knocked. She hugged Lila hard and gave me a thinner embrace. Ethan, she said, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, I replied. Inside, the house smelled like roast and cinnamon and someone else's life. Diane's dining room table was set with gold-rimmed plates. 2 extra place settings sat at the far end. One for Gavin, and one for someone Diane called a friend, which told me everything. This wasn't a surprise. It was a plan. Lila leaned in and whispered, Don't be late to the table. I smiled. Wouldn't dream of it. Diane walked us into the living room where the tree glowed like it was proud of itself. I'm glad you could both make it, Diane said. This year, let's focus on peace. Lila squeezed my arm. Her nails dug in lightly, warning disguised as affection. I looked at the tree, the lights blinking slow and steady. Peace, I thought, is what comes after the storm. And I'd brought the weather. The doorbell rang at 6:58. Diane straightened her blouse like she was greeting a senator. Lila's face lit up in a way that made my stomach turn. Too quick, too bright, too practiced. I stayed in my chair. Diane opened the door, and cold air rushed in with the scent of snow and engine exhaust. Gavin, Diane said, delighted. Gavin stepped inside, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing a grin that looked glued on. His hair was perfect. His coat was expensive. His eyes scanned the room like a man checking his reflection in every window. Then he saw me. For a fraction of a second, the grin faltered. Then it snapped back into place, sharper this time. Ethan, he said, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, I said. Lila moved toward him fast, like gravity had shifted. She touched his arm, just above the elbow, and her fingers lingered. If anyone had asked, she could have called it friendly. But I saw the way his shoulders relaxed, like he'd been touched there before. Gavin handed Diane the wine. Thank you for having me, Mrs. Hale. Call me Diane, she said. We're family tonight. Family. The word landed heavy in my head. Gavin's gaze flicked to Lila. You look amazing, he said. Stop, Lila said, laughing. Ethan will get jealous. Her eyes found mine. She was daring me. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I let the silence be my response. Gavin cleared his throat. No jealousy, he said lightly. We're all adults, right? Adults, I agreed. Diane clapped her hands. Perfect. Let's eat before everything gets cold. We sat at the table, Diane at the head, Lila beside me, Gavin across from me, close enough that I could see the tiny pulse jumping in his neck when he swallowed wine. Diane talked about neighbors, about church, about charity drives. Lila laughed at the right moments. Gavin made jokes about corporate nonsense that sounded like he'd practiced them for crowds. I chewed my food and listened. Every sound felt amplified. Silverware tapping plates, the furnace clicking on, Lila's laugh, too loud, too sharp. Diane served the food like she was conducting an orchestra. She corrected where Gavin set his napkin. She praised his wine choice. She asked him about his work with the community, and every time he answered, she nodded like he was giving a sermon. When I spoke, she listened with half an ear. So, Ethan, Diane said at one point, are you still handy? I swallowed a bite of turkey. Still handy. Gavin chuckled. That's useful, he said. I can barely hang a picture. Lila laughed like it was adorable. Ethan loves fixing things, she said, and her tone made it sound like a harmless hobby, not the way I kept our entire life functioning. Then she added, smiling at Gavin, some people are built for stability. It was the kind of comment you could pretend was nothing, the kind of comment meant to land only if you were listening closely. I set my glass down and kept my face smooth. Because the trick was this. If you react, you make it about your reaction. If you stay calm, you make it about what they said. And what she'd said in her mother's dining room was that I was furniture. Gavin's knee brushed Lila's under the table, just once. A quick private tap, not an accident, a signal. Lila didn't pull away. I watched Diane notice the movement out of the corner of her eye. She didn't say anything. She just blinked twice, like she was filing it away. That blink told me Diane hadn't invited Gavin for closure. She'd invited him because she liked the idea of my place being replaceable. Halfway through the main course, Diane turned to me. Diane poured more wine and asked Gavin to tell a story about the old days, and Gavin obliged, talking about college parties and mistakes in a way that made his choices sound charming. Lila leaned into it, laughing, adding details, touching his forearm when he paused like she was helping him remember. I watched their hands the way you watch a magician's hands, because the real trick is always there. Diane turned to me again. "Ethan, isn't it nice?" she asked. "To have everyone together?" Together. That word again. Like my discomfort was a minor side dish. "It's memorable," I said. Gavin raised his glass. "To growth," he said. "To not being stuck." Lila clinked her glass against his, deliberate. "To maturity," she said. They both looked at me, waiting. I lifted my glass, but didn't clink. "To honesty," I said. The word landed like a stone in a pond. Ripples moved across faces. Lila's smile twitched. "See?" she said quickly. "We're fine." Diane nodded, relieved. Good. After dinner, we'll do your gratitude thing." "After dinner," I agreed. I ate slowly, letting them fill the air with their performance, because the best time to strike isn't when people are tense. It's when they think they're safe. "Ethan," she said syrupy, "how was work? Still at the hardware store?" I nodded. "Still there." Gavin smiled. "Respect. Honest work," he said, like he was handing me a consolation prize. Lila patted my knee under the table. Her hand was warm, possessive. Diane leaned forward. "And you're okay with all of this?" She gestured vaguely at the table, at the air, at Gavin sitting where my pride should have been. "Of course," I said. "Lila asked me to act like an adult." Gavin chuckled. "She said you would." Lila's lips curved. "See? We can do this." I set my fork down slowly. "Actually," I said, "I brought something." Diane's eyes brightened. "Oh?" "New tradition," I said, and pulled the stack of index cards from my pocket. Gratitude cards. Everyone writes one thing they're grateful for. Then we read them out. Lila blinked, then laughed. "That is so... you." Gavin smirked. "Sure, why not?" Diane looked pleased. "That's lovely, Ethan. That's lovely." I handed out the cards and marker. 3 cards, 3 hands moving, 3 people performing. I watched Lila write without hesitation, her handwriting quick and confident. I watched Gavin write slower, glancing up now and then like he was worried about what word would sound best if read aloud. Diane wrote carefully, like she believed the card would be saved in a scrapbook. When they finished, I collected the cards and placed them in a small bowl in the center of the table. "Okay," Diane said. "Who goes first?" Lila leaned toward Diane and said, "Isn't this sweet? Ethan's trying." Trying. Like I was a kid making macaroni art. Gavin smiled and said, "He's handling this well," in that same tone men use when they praise a dog for not barking. Diane nodded, relieved again. "See, that's all I wanted." All she wanted was quiet. Not truth, quiet. I looked at the candle flames flickering on the table and thought about how people love peace the way they love a locked door until they realize what's trapped inside with them. "I will," I said. Lila raised an eyebrow. "You wrote one too?" "I did," I said. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the envelope. I set it beside my plate, flat and plain. Gavin's eyes locked on it. The grin on his face thinned. "What's that?" Lila asked, her tone suddenly cautious. "My gratitude," I said. Diane laughed. "Oh, Ethan. You didn't have to make it fancy." I slid my own index card out of my pocket. I held it up. "I'm grateful," I said, "for clarity." Lila's smile faltered. "Ethan." "And I'm grateful," I continued, "for paper." The room shifted. Not dramatically. Just a subtle change in air pressure, like before a storm. Gavin's hand tightened around his wine glass. Diane blinked. "What do you mean?" I opened the envelope. In the first sheet, Our phone account call log slid onto the table like a clean, quiet slap. Nobody screamed. That's what movies get wrong. Real shock doesn't come with sound. Real shock comes with a kind of vacuum, like the world sucks the oxygen out because it doesn't want to deal with what's happening. Diane stared at the paper. Lila stared at me. Gavin stared at the exit. I tapped the highlighted rows with my finger. "This is our phone plan," I said, my voice calm. "Account holder, me. These are calls from Lila's line to Gavin Mercer's number over the last 6 months, mostly after 10 p.m. Lila's face went pink. You looked at my call logs?" "I looked at the account," I said. "The one I pay for." Gavin opened his mouth, closed it, then tried for a laugh. "Come on, man. Calls don't mean—" I slid the second sheet out. The Lakeside Lodge reservation confirmation. "King bed," I read. "Second guest arriving Friday. Early check-in requested." Diane's hand flew to her mouth. "Lila." Lila's eyes were on me now, sharp and furious. "You're doing this here?" she hissed. "You told me not to embarrass you," I said. "So I'm not yelling, I'm just sharing what's true." Gavin pushed his chair back slightly. "This is private," he said. "It was private," I said. "Then you walked into Diane's dining room like you belonged here." Diane looked like she might faint. Is this real?" she whispered. Lila snapped at her. "Mom, don't—" Diane held up a hand. "Don't speak to me like that," she said, voice trembling. Lila turned to me, rage rising. "You're insane. You're stalking me." "Stalking is secret," I said. "This is paperwork you left in shared places. You did the work for me." Gavin stood. "I'm leaving." He took one step toward the hallway. "Sit down," Diane said suddenly, and her tone surprised even her. Gavin froze. I watched him, and I saw it. The fear. Not fear of me. Fear of the story breaking loose from his control. I slid the third page onto the table. The screenshot. "Congrats again on your engagement," the comment read. Gavin's face drained of color. Diane leaned in, squinting. "Engagement?" Lila's head jerked toward Gavin. "What?" Gavin's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Who are you engaged to?" Lila asked, and her voice had a crack in it now. Something human, something messy. I kept my tone flat. "Looks like Gavin's fiancé thinks he's a man of integrity." Gavin's eyes flashed with anger. This is out of context." "Context," I said, "is you showing up to Christmas dinner with my wife while planning a wedding with someone else." Diane's chair scraped as she stood. "Gavin," she said, voice low. "Is that true?" Gavin swallowed. "Diane, listen." "No," she said. "You listen. You came into my home." Lila shot to her feet too, the green silk of her dress catching the light like scales. "This is a setup," she spat at me. "You planned this." "Yes," I said. "I planned it." Her eyes widened, like she couldn't believe the underdog had teeth. "I told you," she said, voice shaking now. "I would ruin you." I reached into the envelope again, slow. I pulled out the divorce petition draft and placed it on the table. "This is what I'm doing," I said. Quietly, legally, Monday morning. The divorce petition sat there like a final receipt. Lila stared at it, then at me, then at Diane, as if she expected someone to laugh and say it was a prank, a holiday skit. "You wouldn't," she said quietly. It was the closest she'd come to fear all night. "I will," I said, "and I'll do it without yelling. That's the part you never prepared for." Gavin shifted, trying to regain control. "You can't just file because you're jealous." I turned my head toward him slowly. "Don't use that word," I said. "Jealousy is a feeling. What you did is an action." Diane put both hands flat on the table. "How long?" she asked Lila, voice raw. Lila looked away. "It's not—" "How long?" Diane repeated, louder. Lila's jaw tightened. "Since summer," she muttered. Diane's face crumpled. "All those Sundays," she whispered. "All those dinners. And you looked me in the eye." Lila snapped, desperate now. "I didn't want to hurt you." "You didn't want to lose comfort," I said. She glared at me. "Shut up." I didn't. "You wanted the house," I said, calm as ever. "You wanted my stability, and you wanted his thrill, so you tried to make me accept it, like a child being told to share a toy." Diane made a sound like pain. Gavin's lips pressed thin. Lila's eyes burned. In the center of the table, the candle flames trembled as if the air itself was nervous. Diane stared at the paper like it was radioactive. Lila's mouth opened and closed. You can't. I can, I said. And I am. Gavin's phone buzzed on the table. A notification flashed on the screen. Emily. He snatched it up too fast, but it was too late. We all saw it. Emily. Diane's eyes narrowed. Who is Emily? Gavin's throat worked. My sister. I laughed once, short and dry. Sure. Lila looked like she'd been slapped. You told me you were single, she whispered to Gavin. Gavin's eyes cut to her, and for a second his mask slipped. His voice turned cold. Don't make this about me. Diane's face twisted with disgust. It is about you, she said. You're sitting at my table while lying to everyone. The room was silent again, but it wasn't shock this time. It was decision. Lila turned back to me, and her voice dropped into a dangerous calm. If you file, she said, I'll tell people you're abusive. The word hung there, ugly, heavy, like a weapon she'd been polishing in the dark. Miss Carter's note echoed in my head. People remember tone more than facts. I didn't raise mine. I already told my lawyer, I said, that you might try that. Lila flinched. What? And I already emailed myself copies of everything, I said, including tonight's invitation text from you, including this reservation, including your call history, boring proof. Gavin backed toward the hallway again. Diane's voice cut through. Nobody leaves, she said, stunned at her own authority. Not until I understand what my daughter has done. Diane's voice rose, shaky but firm. Give me the phone, she said to Gavin. Gavin stiffened. No. Then tell me the truth, Diane snapped. Gavin laughed, high, forced. This is ridiculous. I'm not handing my phone to the woman whose table you're poisoning, Diane said. Lila stepped between them, protective now in a way that wasn't love so much as instinct. Mom, stop. You're overreacting. Diane stared at her. Overreacting? You brought a married man to my Christmas dinner and lied to my face for months. Lila recoiled. Months? Diane's eyes narrowed. Don't pretend this started tonight. The air in the room felt thick, like it was full of unseen dust. I could have piled on then. I could have thrown every suspicion, every gut-feeling memory on the table. I didn't. I stayed with what I could prove, because proving is what separates a villain from a fool. I tapped the reservation page again, the highlighted line glowing under the light. Second guest, I said softly. That's not closure, that's planning. Lila's lips parted. For a moment, she looked like she might actually say, I'm sorry. Then her eyes hardened. You're trying to control the story, she snapped. You've always needed to control the story. I nodded once. No, I said. You're afraid you don't control it anymore. That was when Diane began to cry. Quiet, embarrassed tears she wiped away fast. I raised you better, she whispered to Lila. Lila's face twisted. Oh, please. The contempt in her voice did what my evidence couldn't. It made Diane's grief turn to something colder. Lila's face twisted. Mom, stop. Diane looked at her like she was seeing her for the first time. And that was when I realized the dinner wasn't just my stage. It was the moment Diane's loyalty shifted. And Lila felt it. For years, Diane had treated Lila like a fragile heirloom. She defended her even when she was wrong, because mothers do that, because admitting your child is capable of cruelty feels like admitting you failed. Gavin tried to recover the way men like him always do, by acting offended. Diane, he said, spreading his hands, this is being taken the wrong way. Ethan is stressed. Lila and I have history, sure, but we're trying to be evolved. He said evolved, like it meant forgiven. Diane's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady. You're not evolved, she said. You're careless, and my daughter is. My daughter is being careless with herself. Lila's head snapped up. Don't talk about me like I'm a child. You're acting like one, Diane said, and that sentence hit the room harder than any shout would have. Lila's face contorted. You always do this, she said to her mother. You always take the side of whoever is disappointed in me. You want me perfect. Diane shook her head slowly. I wanted you honest. It would have been funny if it hadn't been my life. The two of them had been fighting the same fight for years, and I'd been the quiet backdrop, the stable man you marry when you want a picture that looks safe. Now the picture was tearing. I watched Lila's eyes dart, calculating, looking for the angle that would make her the victim again. She was good at angles, but angles don't matter when the floor collapses. For a long time, I'd built myself around being reasonable, being the guy who didn't scare people, The guy who fixed what was broken. The guy who kept his voice down. Reasonable men make good husbands. They also make easy targets. Standing there with Lila shaking and Gavin sneering, I felt something shift in me, like a latch finally giving way. Not a snap, not madness, just a clean internal decision. If she wanted a monster, she was going to get a careful one. But that night, under the gold lights and the half-eaten turkey, Diane's eyes changed. "Lila," she said softly, "tell me you didn't." Lila's chin lifted. She was switching tactics. When charm fails, she goes to certainty. "Mom," she said, voice tight, "don't be dramatic. Ethan is twisting things. Gavin is a friend." "A friend you've been calling at midnight," Diane snapped. Lila's gaze flicked to me, hatred shining. "You're spying." "I'm paying attention," I said. Gavin tried to laugh again. "Diane, please. This is between them." Diane turned on him. "You," she said, and her voice could have iced a lake. "Do you have a fiancé?" Gavin's eyes darted toward the door. "It's complicated." "It's not," I said. "It's a name on your phone." Lila stared at Gavin like she was watching her fantasy collapse in real time. "Emily," she whispered. "Who is she?" Gavin's jaw tightened. "She's nobody." The way he said it, sharp, dismissive, was the twist. Not that he had someone else, that my wife was disposable to him. Lila's face went white. "You told me?" Gavin cut her off. "You knew what this was." Diane gasped like she'd been punched. Lila's eyes filled with tears that looked almost real. I thought... "You thought you were special," Gavin said, and the cruelty in his voice was casual, like it was a habit. "You thought you were the one I'd risk everything for." The room went so quiet I could hear the clock in the hallway ticking. Lila's hands shook. She looked at me like she wanted to blame me for this too, like my exposure had somehow forced Gavin to be honest. Diane's voice trembled. "Get out," she said to Gavin. Gavin blinked. "Excuse me?" "Out," Diane repeated. "Now." Gavin's face hardened. "Diane, don't be foolish. You have nothing in my home," Diane said. "You are not welcome." Gavin's nostrils flared. He looked at Lila for backup. Lila didn't move. She was staring at the phone log papers like they were a mirror showing her own face, and she hated what she saw. Gavin turned back to me, eyes sharp. "You think you won?" "I think I'm done," I said. He scoffed. "She'll take you for everything." Lila snapped out of it. "Yes," she said suddenly, voice regaining force. "I will. You think you can kick me out? You think you can ruin me? I'll make you regret this." She leaned toward me across the table, tears gone, anger back. "I'll tell everyone," she hissed, "that you're unstable, that you threatened me, that you're controlling. I'll make sure you never see another day of peace." Diane stared at her. "Lila." Lila didn't look at her mother. She was all performance now, desperation dressed as power. I nodded slowly, like I was considering her offer. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen and set it on the table, speaker facing up. A voicemail played. Short, clean, dated 2 days ago. Lila's voice, bright and careless. "Ethan, stop being weird. Gavin's coming to dinner. If you freak out, I swear I'll tell Mom you've been acting scary again." The message ended with her laugh. Diane's hands flew to her mouth again. Gavin's eyes widened. Lila's face froze. "You saved my voicemail?" she whispered. "I save everything you say when you're trying to control me," I said quietly. "Because adults keep records." Diane looked at her daughter with horror. "Lila, what have you been doing?" Lila's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time all night, she looked young. Not innocent, just young and caught. Gavin stepped toward the hallway again, like he might slip out while the family imploded. I stood. "Sit," I said to him, not loud, but sharp. He stopped. Diane's eyes flicked to me. "Ethan," she said, voice trembling. "What are you doing?" "I'm finishing," I said. I gathered the papers and placed them back in the envelope. I did it slowly, like I was putting away dinner leftovers. Calm, methodical. Lila watched my hands. Her breath came faster. "What else do you have?" she asked, almost pleading. I looked at her. "Enough." Gavin's phone buzzed again. He glanced down, panic flickering. Another message from Emily. He typed fast, hiding the screen. I smiled at him. "You should answer," I said. "She might be wondering where you are." Gavin's eyes flashed. "You don't know what you're messing with." "Oh," I said. "I know exactly." I turned to Diane. "I'm leaving," I said. I'll be filing Monday. Lila can contact my lawyer. Diane looked torn, like her instinct still wanted to protect her daughter. Then she looked at the papers again, at the voicemail, at Gavin's phone lighting up like a guilty conscience. Her shoulders sagged. Lila, she said softly, you need help. Lila's eyes burned with hate. You're taking his side? I'm taking reality's side, Diane said. Lila's face twisted. She shoved her chair back, the legs scraping loud against the floor. You think you're some hero? She spat at me. You're nothing. You're a hardware store guy. You'll crawl back. I stepped around the table and leaned close enough that she could smell my breath. I'm not a hero, I said. I'm the man you tried to humiliate in public. Her eyes widened. And I'm the man, I added, who learned how to stop caring if you like him. Gavin finally moved, rushing toward the hallway. Diane stepped in his way. Where are you going? Home, Gavin snapped. Diane pointed toward the front door. That way. He hesitated, then stormed out. Lila stood shaking, her hands clenched. I picked up my coat. Ethan, Diane said, voice cracking, where will you go? I looked at the Christmas tree glowing in the corner. Home, I said. My home. Lila laughed, high and sharp. It's our home. I glanced at the lease folder in my bag by the door. No, I said. It never was. The cold hit my face the second I stepped outside Diane's house. Snowflakes drifted down slow, lazy, like the sky was unaware it was witnessing a marriage gone. Lila followed me out onto the porch. Behind her, Diane stood frozen in the doorway, one hand on the frame like she needed something solid to hold. The porch light cast Lila's shadow long across the steps, stretching toward me like it still wanted to grab. Ethan, she said, voice tight, get back inside. We're not done. We're done, I said. She laughed again, brittle. You think you can just leave? You think you can file papers and that's it? Yes, I said. That's what filing does. Her face hardened. You're not taking everything from me. I'm not taking, I said. I'm returning what you threw away. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so Diane couldn't hear. You're going to regret humiliating me. I didn't humiliate you, I said. You brought your humiliation to dinner and asked me to carve it. Her eyes flashed. I can destroy you. Try, I said. The word came out calm. Not brave, not loud, just sure. Lila's mouth opened. She was used to me backing down, used to me softening, used to me apologizing for things I didn't do just to end the tension. Tonight, there was no softening. She reached for my arm. Don't touch me, I said. She froze. The command startled her more than anger would have. You can't talk to me like that, she said, and her voice was suddenly thin, almost childish. I can, I said, because you're not my wife anymore. You don't get to decide that, she snapped. I nodded toward Diane in the doorway. You decided it the moment you invited him? Lila's eyes darted to her mother, then back. Mom's always on my side, she said, like she needed to believe it. Diane's voice broke the air. Lila, she said softly, come inside. Lila whipped her head around. Not now. Diane took a step out, snow dusting her slippers. Now, she repeated. You're coming inside. Lila's face twisted with shock. Are you kidding me? Diane shook her head, tears in her eyes. I'm not. I won't support this. Lila stared at her mother like she was a stranger. That was the second jaw that dropped tonight. Lila's, when she realized her safety net had a limit. She turned back to me, rage and panic mixing. Where are you going to sleep? She demanded. In the car? In some motel? I looked at her. In my bed, she scoffed. You can't lock me out. I pulled the lease folder from my bag and flipped it open right there under the porch light. Paper shone pale. Names, signatures, dates. I pointed. Your name isn't on it. Yours never went on it because you said paperwork was a vibe brutaler. Lila's eyes moved over the page like it was written in a language she'd never bothered to learn. That's, she started. That's the rule, I said. You live there because I let you. Starting tonight, I'm not letting you. Diane gasped. Ethan. I'm not throwing her into the snow, I said, still calm. She can stay here. She can stay with friends. She can stay with Gavin, if he answers. But she's not coming back to my house. Lila's face turned red. You can't do this on Christmas. You did, I said. She stepped toward me again, shaking. You think you're some villain now? I considered that. The word villain. The kind of word Lila liked, because it meant she could be the victim. I leaned in, close, and spoke softly. I'm the consequence, I said. Her eyes widened. She looked past me then, down the driveway, where a black SUV sat crooked at the curb, hazard lights blinking. Gavin's SUV. He stood beside it in the snow, phone to his ear, yelling at someone. Even from here, I could hear the edge in his voice. Emily, listen. No, it's not. He saw us on the porch and froze mid-sentence. Our eyes met across the yard. For one heartbeat, the whole night condensed into a single image. My wife pale on the porch, her mother in the doorway, her lover in the snow with his integrity spilling out of his mouth in frantic pieces. I lifted my hand and gave Gavin a small wave. Friendly. Adult. Then I turned back to Lila. You wanted me to act like an adult, I said. This is it? I stepped down the porch stairs, snow crunching under my shoes, and walked toward my car without looking back. Halfway down the steps, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Ms. Carter. Remember, don't argue. Leave. Document. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The advice was already in my bones. Lila followed me down onto the walkway, snow crunching under her heels. Ethan, stop! She hissed. You're going to regret this. I stopped by my car and turned to face her, letting the porch light catch my expression. I wanted her to see what calm looked like when it was finished being polite. I regret staying quiet while you practiced being cruel, I said. I regret thinking love was a reason to accept disrespect. Her eyes flashed, and she moved closer, too close. Say it, she demanded. Say you're scared. I shook my head once. No. Behind her, Gavin's voice rose again in the driveway, panicked now. Emily, don't hang up, please. He looked up at the same moment I did, and we watched each other like two men standing on opposite sides of a bridge that had burned behind us. Gavin started toward us, phone still in his hand. Ethan, he called, forcing calm. We should talk. I didn't move. We already did, I said. He stopped a few feet away, snow gathering on his shoulders. His eyes were rimmed red, not from tears, but from the strain of holding his world together with lies. You don't understand what you just did, he said. Oh, I do, I said. You walked into a room and expected me to be furniture. Furniture doesn't talk back. His jaw clenched. He glanced at Lila, then at Diane, then back at me. The calculation again. Witnesses, cameras, story. He lowered his voice. If my fiancé finds out, it'll ruin me. I smiled slightly. Adults deal with consequences, I said. Lila made a choking sound. Don't you dare. I'm not doing anything, I said, still calm. I'm letting the truth do what it does. Gavin's phone buzzed again. He looked down, and his face tightened like a man swallowing glass. He backed away, stumbling toward his SUV. Lila watched him go, and something broke in her expression, something like the first honest realization of the night. She'd tied herself to a man who wouldn't even stand in the snow for her. When Gavin reached his SUV, he threw the door open and climbed inside, still on the phone, still pleading. The hazard lights blinked like a heartbeat, trying to restart. I looked back at Lila one last time. You wanted a Christmas dinner with your past sitting at the table, I said. Now you can keep it. Then I opened my car door and got in. The engine turned over on the first try. The heater groaned. The windshield fogged at the edges. I sat with my hands on the wheel and let myself feel it. The hollow space where love had been, the strange relief where fear had been. In the side mirror, I saw Lila on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, not from cold, but from disbelief. I saw Diane behind her, still holding the doorway like it might close on the whole nightmare if she gripped hard enough. Gavin's SUV hazard lights kept blinking in the driveway. A fake heartbeat, a warning signal, a distress call nobody answered. I put the car in reverse. Snow crunched as I backed out. This was the part Lila never pictured, me leaving without begging. Behind me, Lila's voice rose, desperate and furious. Ethan, you can't just... But her words dissolved into the night, swallowed by the cold. I didn't answer. The taillights of Gavin's SUV flashed red in my mirror as he pulled out behind me, then hesitated, then turned the other way, choosing his own escape over hers. Lila saw it too. I watched her shoulders sag, like a marionette whose strings had been cut. That was the last gift he ever gave her, the truth delivered without words. The radio in my car stayed off. In the quiet, I could hear my own breathing, steady now, and the faint tick of snow hitting glass, like tiny fingers tapping goodbye on a window that had finally been shut. I didn't need to.